These blasts from the past left an unforgettable mark. When fishermen head out to sea, they hope to return with a full net. But one captain hauls in a catch that might just sink him.
It's October 2022, and Captain Glenn Westcott and his crew are fishing off the coast of Rhode Island. It's a family operation, so helping him man the rigging are his son and nephew.
As they haul their catch and drop it on deck, fish are flopping around everywhere. That's when Captain Glenn notices something unusual.
Mixed with the fish is a large, corroded metal barrel. But it doesn't look like a normal barrel, like an oil drum. It's covered with all these bolts and metal plates, and it's really heavy.
The captain's first move is to call the Coast Guard, who then races a boat out to evacuate the crew. The Coast Guard quickly realizes that they're in over their head, so they call in the Navy.
When the Navy explosive experts arrive, they lose no time in identifying the threat. It's a World War II Mk6 depth charge, loaded with 270 pounds of TNT. It's enough to bring down a small building.
During World War II, depth charges played a vital role, serving as a primary defense against German U-boats.
After these depth charges roll off the back of a destroyer escort or a frigate, they sink very rapidly, and when they reach a specific depth, which has been preset by the crew, the pressure fuse triggers the bomb, and it goes off, and it sends a shock wave, and that shock wave reaches the enemy submarine hull and crushes it.
The goal was to sink any submarines lurking in the area. In some cases, multiple ships would rain down hundreds of depth charges, hoping one of them will cause the destruction of the U-boat.
Based on where it was found, naval historians believe this particular depth charge was dropped in one of the final sea battles of the war.
So in May 1945, a Coast Guard frigate and a Navy destroyer spotted German submarine U-853 just 2 miles off the coast of Rhode Island.
The two American ships unleashed a barrage of 195 depth charges, hoping to sink the sub. Eventually, the relentless pounding sent the German U-boat to the ocean's floor.
Apparently, not all those depth charges detonated, because here one is, 80 years later, in Captain Glenn's net.
All of those control measures that are in the depth charge to keep it from going off have all corroded. It really could go off at any minute. So the Navy works with the Coast Guard to set up a perimeter to ensure that nobody gets too close.
The Navy carefully removes this from the fishing boat. They take it out to sea. They're a mile offshore. They put other explosives around it, and they detonate it. And as an explosion, bystanders said they could feel on the shore.
I know fishermen are full of tall tales about the one that got away, but in this case, I'm sure that Captain Glenn and his crew were happy to let this one go.
When you're digging in your yard, you have to be careful. You could hit a pipe, sprinkler line, or if you're really unlucky, something much more dangerous.
In 1993, in the Spring Valley section of Washington, D.C., a construction crew is preparing to dig a trench. They're surrounded by some of the fanciest houses in D.C., the kind of place where your next-door neighbor might be a U.S. senator or an ambassador.
A backhoe operator fires up his engine and begins digging. Suddenly, the bucket on his backhoe hits something and makes a large clang. He climbs out of the machine to go down and have a closer look.
As he peers down into the hole, he's stunned. What he's hit isn't a rock, and it looks pretty alarming. It's metal and shaped like a foot-long bullet.
They are panicked, so the crew calls the fire department. When they see it, they panic and call the cops. And yes, the cops also panic, so they call the bomb squad. The bomb squad confirms that this is a real World War I mortar shell.
Concerned there could be more bombs buried nearby, the authorities carefully search the rest of the area.
They find dozens more of these mortar shells. Of course, they immediately evacuate 25 of the surrounding homes, and they call in the Army to try to get a handle on the situation.
Even though these shells are old and corroded, they're still alive, therefore still dangerous. So they could explode.
When the Army arrives, they start carefully removing these shells, and within a few days, they've uncovered 140 of these.
However, what looks like standard ammunition hides an even deadlier secret.
These shells were not designed to kill and maim through fragmentation. It's worse than that because this site used to be home to a U.S. Army chemical weapons depot. Inside of these shells are some of the deadliest chemical compounds known to humankind.
World War I broke out in 1914, and it was the first war that started since the Industrial Revolution. A lot of new weapons were being tried out for the first time, and one of the worst of these was chemical weapons.
Highly poisonous compounds like mustard gas were loaded into shells and fired at the enemy. When they hit, they'd unleash a cloud of death. They would burn and blister flesh, destroy soldiers' lungs, cause blindness, and often they'd lead to an excruciating, painful death.
In 1917, as the United States is preparing to intervene in the First World War, it establishes a chemical weapons service in the U.S. Army. The new U.S. Army Chemical Service enters into an agreement with the new American University, and together they establish this facility called Camp Leach.
There they tested chemicals on soldiers' skin, tried out new designs of gas masks, and they developed toxic chemical compounds, loaded them into mortars, and fired them there, right on site.
But before the new weapons could be sent to the front, Germany surrendered and the war was over. Camp Leach was shut down. They dug pits in the ground, stuffed the chemical weapons in, and just buried them.
At the time, the military thought these chemicals will dissipate on their own. So no one really thought much when 10 years later, 1928, the ground was turned over to developers to build what would become this ritzy neighborhood.
Now, 7 decades later, these canisters remain just as lethal as the day they were buried, making this wealthy neighborhood a dangerous minefield.
The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and several private hazardous waste disposal companies have been working to try to bring this problem under control, but the problem keeps getting bigger and bigger. They'll clean up one burial site of former World War I chemical weapons and then immediately find another one.
The Spring Valley site is about 661 acres of land, and nearly 1,600 private homes, several embassies, and American University sit atop this collection of toxic chemicals.
In the end, it takes the government nearly 30 years and $250 million to clean up the mess. They remove over 1,000 military shells filled with the deadliest chemicals and poisons man has ever developed. And yes, today they say they think they've got it all. But honestly, if I were buying a house, I'd be looking for a discount.